Episode of Embrace Life Boldly. This podcast is all about seeing, discovering, finding ways to embrace life, to fully get involved in shifting the things that are hard, to boldly go through life as no one has before. But today in this episode, I really want to talk about one of the toughest transformations I have made in my life, which is living judgment free from self. Living judgment free from self involves planting seeds and tools that ultimately cultivate like self compassion, self awareness, and non judgmental attitude towards oneself. It also involves shifting out of cognitive distortions that, are created by this human existence, right? By other people in our external lives. Another way is like, AKA those thoughts that keep you from jumping to conclusions, right? I mean, we're so quick to jump to conclusions about ourselves, about others, about everything. And, before I get started, before I get into a few steps of how to begin living in a judgment-free zone, I want to just share with you a story. Okay, so so picture this in my young maybe my late 20s, young 30s. I used to go out with a friend of mine, and our favorite thing to do for fun, no matter what we were doing, was to tease other people we saw around us. And some of those examples would be like, we would look at each other and be like, girl, look at her makeup. What was she doing? What was she thinking today? Or perhaps we would see somebody and say, man, does she not have any friends to tell her that that outfit is just not matching? you know, and I often remember this one time we would talk about, like this bartender and he was like super slow. We'd be like, did this bartender go to turtle school? Like, why is he so slow? And oftentimes we would laugh the way that she would be approached at a bar or a restaurant by a guy. And, when they would walk up to her, one of her first questions to them is, do you make six figures? Because if you don't, then there's like really no reason to have this conversation. I mean, we were so mean, so bad. And I think we all can relate being there, once or twice in our life, where we're just like saying these things or talking about other people that really, whether we knew them or not knew them, or just, just period, just talking about other people. And it wasn't until, a day that I was dating my now wife, we were sitting on the couch and she asked me, she's like, why do you and your friend judge what other people do and think and or wear, and now to be honest, I really didn't realize that I was doing it until my wife brought it to my attention, because at the time, again, my friend and I was just screwing around. I truly did not see it as judgment. It was like it was more like a bonding thing with me and my friend. It was like this thoughtless, it was just something to do. And, which was not good. But in that newfound realization of becoming more aware about the negative things I was saying about others, I began to realize how much negative self-talk was happening internally with myself, right? And this awareness allowed me to be more vigilant, with my thoughts towards others and myself. I recognize that when I would have a thought and make sure when I would have a thought, I made sure I stopped myself, right? Like I began to find a way to like, okay, here's a thought, whether it be about the bartender who's too slow or about myself. I was just like, okay, hang on a second. Because I realized I was not speaking nicely to myself, then something shifted, right? In the middle of this new awareness, I realized the judgment I was giving to myself and others, that it was causing more pain inside me. So by making sure I was not judging others, I did begin to judge myself. And at this point, I had just decided, like, look, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. It's not right to them. It's not right to me. So I choose to get serious about transforming out of this habit and go from judging to loving. And it can be a tricky thing, especially when you've built friendships and bonds with people where this is what you did. Especially that bond that you have with yourself about judging yourself all the time. But with the transformation, I learned a few things. And of course, I want to share them with you guys because why not? I mean, this is what this podcast is about. This is a time in my life where I completely embraced like this concept of judgment-free self in a bold manner. And so here are a few things that I did. The first one was mindfulness. Mindfulness helped me observe my thoughts and emotions. It allowed me to see and hear my thoughts, the choices I was making more clearly and with greater acceptance of my reality. The truth of transformation is while observing thoughts, things can get ugly. I mean, pretty freaking ugly and hard. I mean, I found it astonishing how many times I just let my thoughts run me, like just completely take control. And with that realization, I made a pact with myself to always do my best, to always say here's that always and never kind of thing, but to always just make sure that I'm like aware, right? I mean, that's really all we can do. But as I was moving along in my mindfulness journey, I read this quote and it shifted everything for me. It's by Joe Dispenza. All that you know out there, he is an amazing, I guess, motivational speaker, spiritual person. I don't know, go look him up. But for me, he really touched a lot of me. And what's amazing about Joe Dispenza is I've had clients that say what Joe Dispenza teaches in 6 hours, you teach in like 13 minutes. So I guess that's a good thing. But here's a quote that he said. If you make the effort to change your inner world of thoughts and feelings, your external environment will begin to give you feedback to show you that your mind has influenced your outer world. So the thing about it is that if you think about that effort to change your inner world of thoughts and feelings, your external environment will begin to give you the feedback to show you that your mind has influenced your outer world. Meaning, with me and my friend continuing to judge other people, we then begin to judge ourselves internally as well, which then created this environment of meanness, negative. There was no way to grow. If it wasn't brought to my attention, I don't even know if I would have grown out of it. So I'm so grateful that my wife brought it to my attention at that time. But mindfulness is about understanding that however your external world is, that's pretty much how you're feeling on the outside. So if you feel like it's chaos or a cycle or being stuck, then that's how you're feeling on the inside. So it's about making those shifts and having those mindfulness thoughts that can, that can improve how you start to accept yourself and all that you are. So that's number one. So practice number two is probably the one I love the most, only because I love to debunk things all the time. So number two is challenge negative self-talk. Okay, so once you have that awareness of what you are thinking and saying, right? The mindfulness tool, the number one thing. So work on that one first for a bit. So once you have that, you notice when you're being self-critical and challenge those thoughts, right? You have this complete awareness of what is going on. So my favorite go-to statement to challenge my negative self-talk is this true? Is what I'm saying about myself true? And why is it true? Was it said by me? Was it given by me? Was it told to me that eventually I believed it? Because there are times when the answer is yes. And when it is yes, I dive into it. Where did it come from? Who created it? What made it? So believe it or not, some of the things we say to ourselves have been said to us by others. Sometimes we're not even the originator of the negative self-talk. For instance, when my father gained custody of us kids, I think I was like 8 or 9. Well, we were 8 or 9. I had a hard time adjusting to my new life. I mean, it was hard. I especially had a hard time in school. So therefore, my parents got me this program called Where There's a Will, There's an A. I don't know if any of you heard about the program, but if you've been on it, I feel you. I feel you. And the program was meant to give you the willpower to learn new academic tools to get A's, right? Of course. But after many, many screaming nights of, why are you so lazy and dumb? Why can't you get this? My parents eventually just gave up. So fast forward a few years later, and it comes to find out, well, I was dyslexic. But by that time, it was too late. I had already adopted that type of language towards myself. I have already adapted that. You're lazy, you're dumb, you're not going to get it. So to challenge the negative self-talk, we replace it with the compassion and more realistic statements. So for me, I said, I am a loving and knowledgeable person who continues to learn from my mistakes, knowing that every failure leads me to success. I will continue to challenge this negative talk because I know that it no longer serves me. Empowering, right? Well, that is what I call a key moment of embracing life boldly. Because, the thing about that is, yes, is it long? Yes, that whole thing, right? I'm loving and acknowledge the person who continues to learn from my mistakes, knowing every failure leads me to success. But, the thing about it is that I needed something lengthy. I needed something to be able to just prove to myself that, yeah, right. I needed to hear something and say something over and over for me to start believing, to let go of the cognitive distortion, but for me to start believing that I'm not lazy and I'm not dumb. It just takes me a little bit because I'm dyslexic, right? And even if you're not dyslexic, right? Perhaps you have been there where your parents were sitting at the kitchen table and they're like, oh my God, why can't you get this? You've been there. For all of us who've been there, it's a wild thing to understand that, like, that is how we speak to ourselves now. So, switch that up. Okay. All right. So number 1 was mindfulness. Number 2 is challenge your negative self-talk. And the third step to living judgment free of self is, all right, are you ready? Be mindful of language. So from the second to the third, on the flip side, you can always talk negative to yourself. You can always talk negative to yourself out loud, right? So the difference between being mindful of language and also from the challenging negative self-talk is that the negative self-talk is inward, right? It's like it's in this egoic mind where you think you hear somebody talking to you and you think it's you, but it's really not. It's just like old memories that are in your past that like come up from your ego and you're like, oh, that's my voice, but it's really not. The third, the mindful of language, is the flip side of that. It's the negative to yourself out loud. So let me give you an example of that. So say someone says, your hair looks great. And you respond back, oh my God, this mop bucket. Okay, so that's me, because this hair, girl. But that's what I would say. They'd be like, oh my God, I love your curly hair and so many colors. And I'm like, this mop bucket? Are you kidding me? So that's why we pay attention to the language we use in everyday conversation. Because that, again, is a way of like, you're judging yourself in that moment. So avoid making derogatory or sweeping statements that could be hurtful or discriminatory to yourself. In other words, speak gently and add compliments in there every now and then. I mean, there is nothing more important than language. So instead say, thank you. I take that compliment and I cherish it. I appreciate you. I mean, because that's a way of saying, I take that compliment in. You're not saying, oh, I love my hair, right? Because maybe you don't, or maybe you haven't gotten there yet. But you can still say, you know what? I take in that compliment and I cherish it. Thank you so much. Because also be mindful of language towards others. Because I'm not sure who came up with that sticks and stones may break your bones, but words cannot hurt me is BS. I mean, major BS. I mean, how BS is that? Because listen, words hurt more. Words hurt more because they stay with you more, right? The sticks and stones, I mean, the bruises go away. That's painful. Yes, it's traumatic. But words, the language, sometimes even the way we say something can stick with us so long that it can destroy and add to that negative self-talk all the time. Plus, it is good to foster kind language. I mean, what you say to others and what others say to you influences each other. And it stays with us the longest, right? I mean, if we foster that kind way of speaking to each other, especially to ourselves, we model that out there in the world. And who knows, maybe you say something nicely to this person, that person will go off and say nicely something to somebody else. I mean, who knows? So that's 1, 2, and 3. So the fourth thing is to let go of comparison. Oof, and let me tell you, Nelly, this is the toughest one for me. I mean, let go of comparison. Okay, so look, I have a twin sister. Therefore, my whole life has been compared to her. We were probably in the womb comparing ourselves against each other. Like, hey, I'm going first. No, I'm going first. Like, no, my amniotic fluid's more. No, mine is. Who knows what we would say? But that was, jokingly comparison. But that's what I'm talking about. For those non-twins out there, I would give the thought of comparing yourself to people in magazines, movies, maybe other family members, maybe some of your friends, that kind of comparison. We joke about it, but then it's serious. Because the not so good thing was that as I got older, I noticed that my comparison to myself was much worse than the comparison of me of my twin, right? And maybe yours is like the comparison to your friend or a family member or a magazine or a movie or whatnot. You're much more, you're noticing that you compare yourself to yourself more often. Like we get mad at ourselves for what we did an hour ago, over for what reason. It's, my wife rolls her eyes every time we're out and about and I ask, is their butt smaller than mine? Are my arms that defined with muscles like that person is? Who has the bigger body, me or them? I just couldn't stop. Like it just became this thing where it's like I used to say that about my twin. Like, is my smile like hers? Are my thoughts like hers? But now it's like, now I'm like, wait a second, how am I compared to that other person out there? Complete stranger. Especially when I compare, especially when we compare ourselves to our past, to our future self, like our past self, like our 20 something to now. It can be a detriment. It could be a cycle of suffering. It could be, we make it be something that needs to not be there, because as we're getting rid, or as we're understanding that self-judgment of self, and all of those amazing things, the mindfulness, right? The challenging negative self-talk, the being mindful of language, and then that let go of comparison. When we do all those things and we work on those things, we begin to live freer in life. It's just, like even today, I'm 10 times better than I was. And for me, it's a wonderful reminder really to how important growth is and how I'm still continuing to work on it. All these tools, all these 4 tools I just gave you are a continuing practice of everyday being in this world, on this planet. We live in a world that is anti-aging, right? But it's okay to get gray hair. It's okay to gain 10 to 25 pounds. It's okay to forget where we put our keys twice or 3 times a day. Our society wants us to be perfect, but that's simply not how life is. We're to grow into aging and all the repercussions that come with it. But we can also say, enough is enough. I want to be free of self-loathing and judgment-free thoughts. The most beautiful thing about all these things is that coaching with me is a way to begin to individualize what it is that you are judging about yourself. Because there are other tools I use in my coaching that align with individual personalities to create a judgment-free life. So if you're ready and want to work with me, I offer you, go to my website. There's even a free 30-minute session consultation that I give to see if we're good fits and how your individual personality can be shifted, because not everybody's the same, right? Some of you with some of these 4 tools, you might have the first one down, maybe the third one's harder, maybe the fourth one's the one you already have down and you don't compare yourself to others. Who knows what it is? It's about us having that conversation and talking about, like, what is your personality, where are you at in life, and then what is it that you want to shift. And from that consultation, we'll break down how I can help you and how I can guide you into those ways. Go to my website. There's testimonies up there of so many people, wonderful, grateful people that are graciously putting like how much they have shifted in life. And this podcast is just another way for me to inform you guys on how I have shifted. And so it's my own personal story that, you might want to jump on. And so there you have it. So that is how I see, feel, and hear how to begin to live judgment-free from self. All right, my friends. Until next time, keep loving, keep growing, and keep embracing life boldly.